I was at a barbecue last summer, standing by the grill with a burger in my hand, half listening to someone's kid arguing about whether a hot dog counts as a sandwich, when I ended up next to my neighbor Steve. Steve's 68, retired about 5 years now. Nice guy, the kind who waves from his porch every morning like it's his job. And since we were both just standing there waiting for the burgers to finish, I asked him the question you ask every retired person, half out of politeness, half out of actual curiosity. How's retirement treating you? I was expecting the usual script. Oh, it's nice, staying busy, keeping ourselves occupied. The kind of answer you give when someone asks how you're doing and you just say fine because that's what the moment calls for. Instead, Steve looks at me, totally calm, like he's telling me what he had for breakfast, and says, honestly, I'm doing way better now than I was when I was working. And I just stood there, burger halfway to my mouth, ketchup probably about to drip on my shoe. Because that sentence didn't compute. You stop earning a paycheck. Money is supposed to start draining out, not piling up. That's the deal we all quietly signed up for without ever reading the fine print. You work, you earn, you save what you can, and then one day you stop working and you start living off whatever you managed to put away, watching the numbers slowly shrink, hoping it lasts as long as you do. That's the story. That's the one everybody tells. So I asked him, how? Like, actually how? And he kind of shrugged and started explaining it, casually, the way people explain things they've lived through but never really had to justify before. And I went home that night and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started reading, digging into actual numbers, talking to a few other retired folks I knew, half expecting them to tell me Steve was some rare exception, maybe he inherited something, maybe he got lucky with a stock. But here's the strange part. He wasn't an exception. This is actually a pattern. There are people all over the country whose net worth is quietly going up after they stop working, not staying flat, not slowly leaking out like everyone assumes, going up. While they're out there playing golf on a random Tuesday afternoon, completely unbothered. If that sounds impossible to you, you are absolutely not alone. I thought the exact same thing standing at that grill. But once you actually understand why it happens, it stops looking like some kind of financial magic trick and starts looking like something a lot more interesting. It starts looking like a system, a quiet, mostly invisible system that almost nobody ever bothers explaining to you because by the time you're close enough to benefit from it, you're usually too deep in your career to stop and ask questions. Here's the thing about money that nobody really sits you down and explains when you're young. We're taught, almost by osmosis, that wealth is a direct result of effort happening right now. You work harder, you earn more, you save a bit of that, and you end up with more. It's a straight line in our heads. Effort goes in one end, money comes out the other. So naturally, we assume the reverse has to be true as well. Stop the effort, stop the paycheck, and the money has to stop growing too. It has to start disappearing, because how could it not? But that belief doesn't actually come from understanding how money behaves. It comes from watching our own lives happen in real time, paycheck to paycheck, missing the part where money that's been sitting and compounding for 20 or 30 years starts behaving completely differently than money you just earned last week. That's the piece almost everyone misses because nobody ever shows it to you. Money, once it crosses a certain threshold and has enough time behind it, stops needing you to keep pushing it forward. It starts pushing itself, quietly, without asking your permission. So let's slow down and actually look at what's happening underneath the surface here because I want to be clear about something. None of what I'm about to walk you through requires luck. It's not some rare cheat code. It's mechanical. Almost boring, honestly, once you see all the pieces laid out next to each other. But boring doesn't mean small. Sometimes boring is exactly what quietly changes your life while you're not paying attention to it. The first thing that shifts, and this one genuinely surprises people every time I bring it up, is taxes. When you're working, the government takes its cut before the money even fully becomes yours. Federal tax, state tax, Social Security, Medicare, all of it disappears before your paycheck ever lands in your account. Depending on where you live and what you earn, that can eat a third, sometimes closer to half, of everything you make. It becomes background noise. Most of us stopped noticing it years ago, the same way you stop noticing a hum in a room until someone points it out. But in retirement, the entire shape of your income changes. Instead of one big taxable salary showing up every 2 weeks, you're often pulling from a mix of sources: Social Security, a retirement account, maybe some savings sitting in a brokerage, and the tax code treats that mixture very differently than it treats a salary. For example, only part of your Social Security income counts as taxable at all, often somewhere around half of it. So imagine $30,000 comes from Social Security and another $30,000 comes from a retirement account withdrawal. You're not taxed on $60,000 like it looks on paper. Once deductions come into play, you might only end up paying tax on something closer to $28,000. That's less than half the actual money you spent that year. It's not a loophole somebody's hiding from you. It's just how the whole structure was built decades ago, and most people never actually see it in action until they're standing inside it themselves, watching their tax bill shrink for reasons they didn't expect. Then there's a quieter shift, one that never makes it into a headline because it's not dramatic enough on its own. Your expenses just start falling away, almost without you doing anything active about it. Think about everything wrapped up in simply being employed: gas money for the commute, work clothes you'd never buy otherwise, the coffee you grab because you're rushing out the door, the lunch you buy because you didn't have 10 minutes to make one the night before. None of that feels significant in the moment. It's $5 here, $12 there, but it adds up in ways we never calculate until it's suddenly gone and we notice the space it used to take up. And then there are the bigger pieces: the mortgage that's finally paid off after decades of payments that used to feel permanent. The kids who are grown and out of the house, no longer needing braces or tuition or cleats for a sport they quit after one season. Retirement doesn't just remove a paycheck, it removes an entire category of spending that only existed because you needed income to sustain it in the first place. It's almost like two ends of the same rope loosening at once, and there's something even less obvious happening underneath all of that. When you're working full-time, you're what I'd call time poor. You have money, or at least some of it, but almost none of your hours actually belong to you. So you pay for convenience because your schedule is already spoken for by someone else. You order takeout instead of cooking because you're exhausted. You pay someone to mow the lawn because weekends barely feel long enough to breathe in. You maybe hire a cleaner because who has the energy after a 10-hour day plus a commute? But retirement hands you back the one thing money could never actually buy while you were working: time. And suddenly you're cooking more, doing your own yard work, handling the small tasks yourself, not because you have anything to prove, but because you finally can. It's not glamorous. Nobody's filming a highlight reel of someone mowing their own lawn, but it quietly saves people thousands of dollars a year without ever feeling like sacrifice, because it doesn't feel like giving something up. It feels like having enough time to just live differently. Now here's the part that genuinely fascinates me, because this is where psychology and math actually collide, and I think it explains why so many people underestimate this entire phenomenon in the first place. Compound growth. You've heard the term 100 times. Most people nod along politely and don't actually feel it because for the first 15 or 20 years of saving, it feels almost insulting. You put money in and it grows by what feels like nothing. $50 this month, $80 the next. It's discouraging, honestly, and I think that discouragement is exactly why so many people quietly give up on saving early or never take it seriously to begin with. The early years lie to you. They make patience look pointless when really they're just the slow, uneventful setup for something much bigger later. Because growth like this isn't a straight line, it's a curve. And curves are sneaky because nothing seems to be happening for a long time, right up until suddenly everything seems to be happening at once. The last 10 or 15 years before retirement often do more heavy lifting than the first 20 combined. I've come across people who contributed maybe $300,000 of their own money over an entire career, paycheck by paycheck, and by the time they retired, that account was worth well over $1 million. The difference wasn't extra effort on their part in those final years. It was time quietly compounding in the background while life happened around them, while they were raising kids and going to work and barely thinking about that account at all. And here's the part that really reframes everything for me. That growth doesn't stop the moment someone retires. As long as they're not withdrawing everything at once, which almost nobody should do, the remaining money keeps growing, even while a portion of it is being spent to live on. It's a strange, almost counterintuitive image once you actually picture it. Imagine a well that refills faster than you're drawing water out of it. You take some out every month to live on, and somehow, months or years later, there's still more sitting in there than when you started pulling from it. That's not a trick. That's just what happens when growth outpaces withdrawal, which for a lot of retirees who planned carefully is exactly the situation they end up in. Then there's Social Security, which gets an enormous amount of criticism, and honestly, some of it is fair. But for most retirees, it quietly does something important that rarely gets credit. It acts like a buffer. It covers a meaningful chunk of basic living expenses with guaranteed, inflation-adjusted income that simply cannot run out the way a personal account theoretically could. And because that baseline need is already covered, retirees don't have to pull as much from their investments to get by, which means more of that money stays untouched, still compounding, still growing, protected, in a sense, simply because it was never needed in the first place. Healthcare tells a very similar story, just with a different timeline attached to it. The years right before Medicare eligibility, especially someone's early 60s, tend to be brutally expensive if they're paying for private insurance out of pocket. But once Medicare starts at 65, that cost often drops dramatically, almost overnight. I heard about a couple who were paying close to $2,000 a month for coverage through the marketplace before they qualified, and the month they both turned 65 and switched over, their combined healthcare costs dropped to somewhere around $400. That's over $1,500 a month suddenly freed up. Not because they earned more money, because the cost of simply existing became cheaper for them, almost like a weight lifting off a budget that had been carrying it for years. Sometimes there's a bigger, more deliberate move, too. Downsizing. People sell a house they've lived in for 20 or 30 years, a house that quietly appreciated in value while they were busy raising a family and going to work, completely unaware of what it was becoming on paper, and they move into something smaller. That single decision can unlock a couple $100,000 in equity, often with minimal tax consequence thanks to how primary residence sales are treated, while also lowering their ongoing monthly costs at the same time. It's not flashy. Nobody throws a party over downsizing, it's just quiet math, working steadily in someone's favor while they focus on other things. And I'd be leaving something out if I didn't mention the part that feels almost too human to include in a video about money. A lot of retirees end up doing some kind of part-time work or a small side project, not because they need the income to survive, but because sitting completely still for 30 years sounds unbearable to most people. Maybe they consult a few hours a week in the industry they used to work in. Maybe they finally start that small business they always talked about but never had the time for. And because that income isn't required to cover their basic living expenses, it just becomes extra. It flows straight into savings, growing the pile even further, purely as a byproduct of someone doing something they actually enjoy. On top of all of that, there are inheritances and windfalls, which is a more unpredictable piece of the puzzle, but a real one. Statistically, people tend to inherit money from their parents during their 60s and 70s, right in the middle of their own retirement years. It's not something anyone can plan around precisely, but when it happens, it often lands at a moment when someone's expenses are already lower and their investments are already compounding, which means that unexpected money tends to get added to a pile that's already growing rather than immediately spent covering gaps. So here's the turning point, the thing that actually shifted how I think about all of this, standing there long after that barbecue ended. We tend to measure our financial worth by how hard we're working right now, in this exact moment. This month's paycheck, this year's raise, whether we got the promotion or not. But real wealth isn't built in the moment you're standing in. It's built in the decades before it, through decisions made so long ago they don't even feel like decisions anymore. They just feel like habits, quiet and repetitive, barely noticeable at the time. Steve wasn't sitting comfortably at 68 because he got lucky at 68. He was, without fully realizing it, setting that exact moment up back when he was 35, barely paying attention to the $50 a month his account was quietly growing by. That reframes a certain kind of anxiety in a way I think is actually useful. If you're in your 30s or 40s right now looking at your savings and feeling like you're somehow behind, like the number should be bigger by now, like everyone else has it figured out except you, that feeling makes sense. But it's measuring the wrong stage of the story. You're standing in the boring middle part, the part that never feels like progress, because structurally it isn't supposed to yet. The curve hasn't bent upward for you yet. That doesn't mean it won't. So what do you actually do with all of this? Nothing extreme, and I want to be honest about that because I'm not interested in selling you some aggressive plan that only works if your life goes perfectly according to schedule. You keep contributing, even when the numbers feel small and almost embarrassingly unimpressive. You resist the urge to pull money out of long-term accounts the moment the market gets scary, because that's exactly the kind of interruption that breaks the process before it's had time to work. You pay attention to debt now while you still have room to deal with it, because carrying high-interest debt into retirement is one of the few things that genuinely breaks this entire pattern from the inside. And you stay mindful of lifestyle creep, because expenses that quietly grow alongside your income tend to cancel out the exact advantage compounding is trying to hand you. None of this guarantees you'll be the next Steve, standing at some future barbecue casually surprising a neighbor with a burger in their hand. Not everyone ends up wealthier in retirement, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. Some people didn't save enough along the way. Some carried debt they never fully resolved. Some had to withdraw too much too early because life demanded it of them. That's real, and it deserves to be said plainly instead of glossed over with false reassurance. But for the people who saved consistently, who avoided the major missteps, who let time quietly do what time does best, retirement isn't the financial cliff it's so often made out to be. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. Sometimes it's the payoff for 100 small, forgettable decisions that nobody, including the person making them, was ever really watching closely. I think about that conversation with Steve differently now than I did standing there at the grill. It wasn't luck. It wasn't some hidden trick he was keeping to himself. It was 30 years of quiet, unremarkable choices finally showing up all at once, arriving so gradually that even he probably couldn't point to the exact moment it happened. And if you're still standing in the part of your own story where nothing feels like it's working yet, where the numbers still look small and the progress feels invisible, that's not a sign you're failing. That's just where the story always feels slowest. Right before it isn't anymore. You don't need to be perfect with your money to end up somewhere good. You just need to still be in the game when the curve finally bends upward, whenever that ends up being for you. Progress, not perfection. That's really all any of this was ever asking of you. So here's what I keep wondering. If Steve's story is this common, how many people are sitting on their own version of it right now without even realizing it? Subscribe to Weston Wealth and like this video as it helps this video to get to more people. Tell me in the comments, at what age did you first realize retirement might actually be different than you thought?